Hi, it's Kim here. One of my students recently was asking, how do I change the size of my finished project? Now, she had made this cushion here, which is what I teach with my beginners online courses and my in-person beginner patchwork courses. And you can see it is in a grid format, but what Sheila wanted to do, hi Sheila, is to resize this. I don't know whether she wanted to go up or down, but the same rules apply. And I thought it was a great question. So I'm going to teach you exactly how to do that. So in this tutorial, there's two parts to this. First part, I'll show you how the measurements work on this grid format. And then in the second half, we will look at how to change the sizes of individual blocks, because there's always exceptions to rules. So I will show you those. So let me switch camera and let's get started. And by the way, if this video is helpful to you, please do consider liking and subscribing, because it really helps you to see my new videos coming up and helps my channel to grow and to reach more beginners like you who need the help. So let me switch camera. So here we go then. So don't panic, this is a grid format. There's a very, very simple bit of maths, and don't worry if you are not a mathematician, I'm not either. This is very easy to follow. So you will notice in the cushion here, if I can squash it into camera, it is in a grid format. We've got 9 basic pieces to this. This is called a 9-patch cushion, and this is the basis of this 9-patch cushion here. Now, with any of your measurements, you need to have your finish size. You need to know what your finish size is, and you need to know what the seam allowance is. So let's just break this down. So this particular cushion that I've been showing, this blue one here, just off stage left, is a 15-inch cushion. And it's broken into 9 blocks. So 15 inches is my finished size. And I'm going to have 3 sections by 3 sections, so it's 9 patches. So I would divide 15 by 3 to get my initial block size. So that would be 5, that would be 5, and that would be 5. So that's just to make the cushion in the size that I designed it. I'm just holding it up to the camera in your little video top left. Okay, so these are all 5-inch blocks making up this cushion. If I was to make this from scratch, so all of these blocks here would be 5 inches. If I'm starting this from scratch, I need to add a seam allowance onto all of them. So I would add 1/2 inch. And that's the size of the square that I would cut to start with if I was making a simple grid format. Now, what happens if I wanted to make this smaller? Well, first of all, I've got 3 columns or 3 rows. It needs to be, so this figure here needs to be divisible by 3 in this situation. So let me just pretend I want 12 inches. I want to come down in size. In that case, we want 12 divided by 3, which is 4. So we are going to have a finished size of these squares of 4 inches. And then I need to add my seam allowance on of 1/2 inch. So all the time you have your finished size plus 1/2 inch, and that would be the same for all of these squares. Let's say I want to go bigger. Let me say I want to make it a massive cushion of 21 inches. So 21 divided by 3 is, I know you're ahead of the game, is 7. So I would cut a square, or I want a finished size square of 7, but I want to cut 7.5. So I am adding 1/2 inch to my finished size. Oops. To make a cutting size of 7.5. And that is a very simple rule. All patchwork pretty much works on some kind of grid format. And if you can do that very basic maths, it is always going to be your finished size plus 1/2 inch. So to make your finished size, all these little blocks here, you would cut those to the finished size plus 1/2 inch. So to recap, 15 inches divided by the 3 here is 5. And you'd add, so that would be finished size 5. When it's sewn together, that would be 5 inches. And then you'd add 1/2 inch seam allowance because, have I got another pen? No, bear with. So if I'm going to sew here, I would have 1/4 inch there, and I would have 1/4 inch seam allowance all over. So that's where that 1/2 inch comes from. And there's obviously one the other side as well. Okay. So on that middle block there, by the time I've sewn it, I have lost 1/4 inch here and 1/4 inch there. So that's my 5 plus the 1/4 inch plus the 1/4 inch. So that's our 5.5 inch block. And that's obviously the same all the way round. Okay. So that's the basic, very basic maths. And I said there's going to be exceptions to this rule. So let me switch to another setup. So just bear with me whilst I do that, because there's going to be exceptions depending on what type of blocks you are using to make this up here. So bear with me. I'm going to swap over cameras and I will see you just in one moment. All right, so we're back for part 2. So let's say we want to make some different blocks. So I've just spoken to you about dividing your finished size squares and dividing it down and adding 1/2 inch. So this over on the left-hand side is a square, and our rule is to add 1/2 inch. For rectangles, here over on the right-hand side, is actually the same rule as the squares. So we would add 1/2 inch to both the short side and the long side. So if this is going to be a finished size of 4 inches by 2 inches for this particular rectangle here, I would add 1/2 inch to both those sides. So I would cut 4.5 inches by 2.5 inches. But when we get to half square triangles and quarter square triangles, we need to treat those a bit differently. Again, we start with our required finished size. So all of these here will end up as a finished size of 4 inches. But you can see how different they are in sizes. So this square here, I have cut at 4.5 inches. But you can see these squares and these squares are a lot bigger than this 4-inch square, 4.5 inch square here. And that's because they need to go and make a half square triangle and a quarter square triangle. So if you've watched my previous tutorials, I'll put some links up above and I'll put some links at the end of the video as well. But if you watch those videos, I'll show you how to make those. But they have a different seam allowance that you need to add on, or a cutting allowance. So with half square triangles, so this is this shape, and if you watch my previous videos you'll recognize these samples from before. It's a bit creased, but doesn't matter. So a half square triangle, to get to ending up as our finished size, we want to add on 7/8 of an inch. So if I want this half square triangle to finish up as a 4-inch half square triangle, finished, completed when it's all sewn together, I need to cut 4 7/8. If I wanted it to finish at a 5-inch finished size when it's all sewn together, I need to cut 5 7/8 of an inch. Okay, so and obviously with half square triangles you'd be cutting 2 squares in contrasting colours to make your half square triangle. And then with a quarter square triangle, and they're going to look like that. Again, you're going to start with 2 squares, but this time we have to add on 1 1/4 inches to our finished size. So if I want this to finish at 4 inches, I need to add 1 1/4 inches. So I cut 5¼ inches. So these shapes here will all get to a finished size of 4 inches when it's all sewn together. So my square on the left, I've cut 4½ inches. My quarter square triangles here, my QSTs, I've cut 2 squares of 5¼ inches. I know. It's that it mind boggles. I appreciate that, but just trust me, it works. So you'd cut 5¼ inches. For my half square triangles, I would cut 4 7/8 of an inch. And then my rectangles, I would want that to finish at my 4 by 2 inches. So I would cut 4½ by 2½ inches. Okay, and if you don't believe me that all these are going to fit together, here's one I prepared earlier. So this little block here, or this little row, this is all of this sewn together. I cut 1 extra triangle. So let me just move these out of the way just to show you. So this, I know it's not a grid shape. I've literally just sewn them together to show you how it all works. So here's my square in the middle. And you can see it looks a bit oblong because I haven't sewn anything to the top and bottom. When I sew something to the top and to the bottom when we join our rows, that'll end up as a finished size of 4 inches. So if I measure along here now, actually I didn't measure it before. This could all go horribly wrong. There you go. You can see that I've cut that at 4½ inches, but by the time I've sewn it, it's now 4 inches. And that would be the same whether I cut 3½ inches or 5½ inches or 7½ inches. My finished size would be 3 inches, 4 inches, 5 inches, 7 inches, whatever I wanted to finish as. And then my half square triangles here, where I cut 4 7/8, these are these ones here. And you might be wondering why there's this sort of gap at the top. That's because, again, I haven't sewn any other rows to the top and bottom, and those would disappear in my seam allowance when I have sewn something to the top and bottom, so they would disappear like that. So when I have sewn these 2 squares together and I have made a half square triangle, they get to this one here. And you can see here again, we've got 4 inches going across, and it's exactly the same. I started this with these blocks here, 4 7/8. And then when we've got our rectangles, I just pop these rectangles in the middle. I thought it looked quite quirky. You can see the beginnings of a shape going on there. I thought that looked quite fun. So we've got a rectangle here that I obviously want to finish with the same 4-inch width here, or length, whatever. So that's 4 inches. I want it cut 4½ because I need this size going along here. Remember, we haven't sewn anything top and bottom, so we haven't lost anything in the seam allowance. So this is still going to be 4½ inches. I don't know if you can see that sort of on the camera there. It's 1, 2, 3, 4½ inches because we haven't sewn anything top and bottom there. But this bit here, where I cut it as 2½ inches, you'll see is now finished size of 2 inches, 1, 2. And then our little quarter square triangles at the end there, they start with the biggest squares. So I started with 5¼ inches so that I could get my finished size of 4 inches going across the square shape here. By the time you've made your quarter square triangle, it will finish up at that 4 inches finished size. And if you follow that rule for all of them, just adding on the appropriate seam allowance with all, you won't go far wrong. So just remember, whether you're sizing up or whether you're sizing down, reducing in size, you do exactly the same thing. What is the finished size that I want? You divide your block into your finished sizes. So this is, so that's 12. That's about 24 inches, that's the finished size. So if I wanted to reduce that down, I would divide it by the number of blocks. to give me my finished size, and then I would add the appropriate seam allowances to be able to do my squares that I would cut, and then I would stitch them together, and you would magically end up with what the size you want. That wasn't very good English, was it? I would finish up with the size I want. So I really hope that has helped you. If you've got any questions at all, please pop a comment below and I will be more than happy to answer and try and help. So thank you for watching. Please do like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.